My father was a nice father. I don't think he really got tiny children very well. My mother was a good mother of small children. If we got sick, she would play card games with us and give us soup and she was not fazed by illness because she was a lab tech. So she was good if you were going to be sick. Like when my brother had chicken pox and I had chicken pox, and my father was like, he got a cold and he was convinced the world had come to an end and it was an injustice wrought upon him. And oh my God, he had a cold. We would laugh at him because he was just a baby, right? Well, my father was, other than I think maybe some back problems at one point and bike crashes, he never had any illnesses at all until he got ALS. So you can imagine.
My father had an ulcer when I was young, peptic ulcer, and nearly died apparently.
Oh, that was very scary. He was very sick.
People don't tend to die of bleeding ulcers anymore, but my father almost did. He had started getting it in France, right?
Maybe so, I'm not sure. I worried him over a certain period, and I don't know if that was because he was clearly in pain at some stages, but I didn't know why. And it was the ulcer.
I guess this went on for a while, but when we went home, I think I was 9 or 10, he got suddenly very, very sick, like he was bleeding.
I think he was at work when he had a serious attack, and I don't know if I took him or they did or somebody did, because he was in the hospital for a while.
My mother had to nurse him back to health. It was a terrible time in our lives because he had just been fired by SRI, and then he got sick. So he thought, A, he wasn't going to be able to make the mortgage and we're going to be out on the streets, and B, he was going to die. But he didn't die, and he found a job a week later right across the street from SRI at Allstate Research and Planning Center. So his life was not disrupted at all. I thought that was rather well played by my father to get a job literally right across the street on the other side of Middlefield Road in Menlo Park.
And I remember my mother saying that she had to pay all the bills for a while, and she was horrified to realize they had no money. My father had been spending everything as fast as it came in. Not much in the way of savings, like some college fund, but nothing much. He would buy a new thing for his bike or whatever, so I think she kind of laid down the law after that, because he was managing the money, but she not so well, maybe. So my father, very outdoorsy, starts biking. I think he and my mom had done one of these Sierra Club trips.
Oh, we did a big hiking trip that was not a great success, I thought. And there was a boy in our group who died on the trip.
Oh my goodness.
He fell off a cliff or something. He was the kind of a little boy who didn't pay much attention to instructions. And he'd gone off by himself, and all of a sudden, boom, he was gone. Of course, we had to call for, we did all the appropriate things. It was very sad.
She just didn't have a good time at all. She really was not that. She did tennis and things a little, but she wasn't that sporty. No. You didn't go hiking, right, Mom?
No, I was too feeble. I didn't do it a lot. He was passionate about it, and he was very strong. I was not passionate, and I was not very strong.
No hiking and no bicycling either, right?
Well, I had a bicycle that I would get on it once in a while.
I don't remember that.
Well, it was true.
I have no memory of you ever riding a bicycle.
Well, I did a few times.
I played a lot of tennis with my father. He taught us to play, and we took lessons. And he was fun because, he wanted to go biking and hiking, and he was only going to do things that he wanted to do, and if we wanted to go along, we could go along. As we got older, I did less of it. And then later, when we were a little older, I guess, he would go, I don't know how he had so much vacation, but he would do a trip in the winter and a trip in the summer. And I'm sure if my mom had wanted to go, we would have all done it, but she didn't have any interest. So he would do a cross-country ski trip in the winter and a back-country backpacking trip in the summer. With his buddies, or whoever he could find to go, I guess. He took Susan Blackman one year. He took Tracy Mallory one year for skiing. The cross-country skiing started when I was about 10, maybe. And the first year we went, so that was a family vacation in the winter, we went to Yosemite.
We went cross-country skiing one year, and Debbie and I both got chicken pox.
Oh, chicken pox. I remember that trip now, but that was many years later, high school
we were
or
older
something.
then. That was high school times.
And my brother started to not feel well. So my mom took him back to the place we were staying. And by the next day, it was clear he had chicken pox. And I started to not feel well. I had the flu. So great family vacation. We lasted half a day. And my father was very upset. By the time we got home, he had the flu. So my poor mother has like 3 sick people, and she's the only healthy one. And then my brother, of course, he didn't get the flu. He had his chicken pox. I got over the flu and immediately got the chicken pox. So I was sick like for a month.
I took care of you guys
Then you got the flu when we got home.
after I had cared for all of you.
And that was hard for her because he wasn't very helpful. He went back to work. But that was not a good year. I think the next year, my dad took my brother and I, my mom stayed home. She said, I'm done with the cross-country skiing. Very wise of her. We took lots of different family vacations.
Yeah, well, you had a father who was very ambitious.
We did a couple of High Sierra trips with the Sierra Club, a family camp. They used to do family, maybe they still do. So you'd go somewhere and set up a camp, and then they'd pack in things. My father loved to go to the mountains, me less so, but we did that.
I remember that we went to San Diego twice. We went because Dad thought you wanted to see all your relatives,
Probably.
but you didn't really want to see all your relatives.
Well, the first time we went, we really barely saw anything because we were visiting family constantly. I think we had maybe 8 cousins to visit separately.
My father thought this would be just so fun to visit all these relatives because they were like exotic pets to him. But for my mother, it was just a burden, go see these old folks and, make nice. And I don't know. I don't think it was really her thing.
But then we'd had fun, so the next time we went and we stayed on the beach, didn't we? I don't know, but it was kind of fun.
I will say, like my dad, because he'd grown up in Coney Island, he was a kind of an ocean kid, right? And he loved the beach, and he liked to make sandcastles and play on the beach, and he could swim well enough to, take us in the waters. We went to Hawaii one year.
That's right. Was that a winter vacation or a summer vacation?
It must have been winter. We went, which island?
Hawaii.
So we went to Hawaii, to the big island. It
Yeah.
was all of us, and who else came?
Nobody?
I think Dottie was with us.
I don't remember.
And didn't we go and look at the volcano and...
Sure.
And Dottie wanted to go to see botanical gardens.
To see what?
Botanical gardens.
Oh, of course. Oh, no, she'd been into gardens. Well, she was an architect and a gardener.
Yes.
Very technically alert in both those areas. Well, we like to send you off to summer camp so we could get someplace on our
that's
own.
really my story, though. But I went to summer camp for 3 years and Matt for 2. And where would you go?
Where, for summer camp?
No, you and Dad while we were at summer camp.
Oh, dear me, I don't remember. But we did.
When I was just out of high school, between high school and college, you went to London. You visited the Blackmans.
That's true. Well,
Remember that trip?
they traveled every summer and lived abroad a lot.
And I had my surgery on my lip that year, and Liz Mallory took care of me because you were on vacation.
We couldn't work it out to get home for you, and we felt awful about it.
No lost siblings on vacations. No arrests. No police send money via Western Union. We're stuck in someplace. My mom still lives in the house that she and my father bought before I was born.
I'm very old, and so I've done a lot of things in my life. I've had time.
She always said she was kind of bored, so she joined an organization when we were growing up. I guess us kids weren't very interesting, so she joined the League of Women Voters, and she just wanted to. She was curious about things, and I don't think being a 1960s housewife was completely fulfilling for her.
You were active in the League of Women Voters.
That's true.
How did you come to get involved in that?
Well, I always knew about it, and I always knew people in it. And I was interested in the things that they were interested in the politics of a region and stuff, and to study it. That was fascinating. Well, we were very political. That's what it was all about. We were running the city. Boom.
Would you go to the city council and lobby as,
Yes.
and did you do that?
No. I was too scared.
So you were a back office person.
I guess you could
You
call
would
it
do
that.
the research.
Yeah. Well, the way it worked in my league was that they would have a committee for a topic, and the committee informally together, and they would study the topic, and when they had reached a certain point, they could present the results of their study. And then there were the unit meetings, and were typically once a month on a given topic. Maybe if some study group had finished its work, there might be a unit meeting at which they would tell you what they had learned and ask for opinions. And the opinions were listed. And, well, if it was local, all those results were compiled as the local feeling about this or that. But if it was state, all the results from here would be mixed in with the results from other leagues from all over the state, and from that you could figure what the state feeling was on that. So that whenever you read someplace that the League of Women Voters is for such and such, it represents study from everywhere within the region described. It isn't just that the president felt that way. So if you've studied an issue, taken a position, then you can act. You don't just act because you all think it's a good idea.
Okay.
That was a very big point with the League of Women Voters.
There was another topic that you were very interested in that I know you were involved in, which was the environment and clean air quality and the baylands, the wetlands. How did you get you? I know.
Well,
you were
that
working-
you get into that sort of thing just because you feel that way. And we were a small committee that only lasted a year or two. The big organizing force behind it moved away. We were called Clean Air Now.
But that was separate from the league.
No, this wasn't the league.
This
no.
was just a group of
But a
people.
lot that I had learned in this group, I was able to apply at league meetings that touched environmental issues.
So Dad was joining groups to learn about wine and food, and you were joining groups to save the
No,
bay.
but he was very interested in the things I was doing because he felt that way too. He was an outdoors person.
He was fighting for bike lanes.
Right. Well, these things, if you go out on a bike, you see an awful lot of stuff that you don't see if you're just in your car or if you don't go anywhere.
When he liked to hike and he went to the Sierras and
Yeah, he loved the out of doors.
When we were older, when I was in junior high and my sister in high school, she went to San Jose State to get a master's degree in what was called computer math with the intention of getting a job. I think she was just bored being in the house.
So when did you decide to go back to school?
Oh, I can't give you a date. I always knew I would do it at some point.
What did you think originally that you would go back for?
Oh, I didn't change my mind over that. I knew what I wanted to do.
What was that?
I wanted to be a computer programmer. You guys were in school, and I was ready to get myself into something interesting and profitable. Okay. So I went back to school, and
Where did you go?
San Jose State.
How did you decide on San Jose State?
Well, it had to be something nearby, something I could commute to, something I could afford, and taught the classes I wanted. I couldn't go to Foothill College because they weren't going to teach the math I needed and wanted.
And you were in a master's program, right?
Yes.
So you took math classes at San Jose State, and what kinds of programming classes?
Introductory. I honestly don't remember exactly what I have to have, but
Did you take Fortran programming at San Jose State?
yes. Well, 1/4 of it.
Why did you decide on Fortran?
Oh, it was the basic scientific programming language then. I don't know what they do now, but that was what it was then.
What about COBOL? Did you do any COBOL programming?
I don't think I did because it was strictly business and I was going for scientific programming. And there was a COBOL class, but I didn't take it.
And she used to commute with some lady friends who were also in the program, I think. Neighborhood women, maybe. Again, all these brainy Stanford grad women who'd kind of stopped and had babies and now were going back to work. It was part of that massive wave. And I don't know how, I think it probably took her like 4 years because she was just going part-time. And each semester she would take a few classes. I mean, obviously she couldn't do too much. She was very smart and very focused. No procrastination with my mother. So I don't remember going to her graduation or anything about that. I just know she was doing it. So you got your master's degree and then it was time to go back to work.
Right.
So how did you look for a job? She told me that she was terrified about looking for a job. Who would hire her? This is also my mother. Very, very smart, very insecure. So,
Well, of course I talked to everybody I knew. Then there was a place in downtown Palo Alto that gave advice to people like me. And I went to them and they knew about Ames and suggested it to me.
but you didn't work for NASA directly.
No, that would have been civil service and I wasn't. Civil service places hire lots of contract people because they keep them for the job and then they let them go, and it's financially makes more sense.
So you got a job at a company working on the base?
It happened at the time they had the job at Ames Research Center, which was NASA.
Can you tell us what kind of work you were doing?
I was doing, not really, I can't because I never understood it. I mean, I was doing computer programming, the scientific. It meant that they were doing a project and they would give me what the problem was and what they were doing, and I would translate it into Fortran programming code.
So you didn't always know what the big picture was?
No. I was just writing sort of the odd program to fill in whatever it was that they were doing.
Did you like it?
I loved it. I had good friends, and it was a nice time.
Why did you like it?
How does anybody know why they like things?
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, we were doing interesting things, and I liked numbers, always did. And I wasn't doing the research. Somebody would be doing a research project and need to have a problem answered, and I would write the code to do that.
You weren't just writing the code, you were solving math problems too, right? Or figuring out...
I don't know. If the program worked and solved the problem, then I guess I was.
Because they needed to do something that calculating by hand would have been impossible.
Maybe not impossible, but time-consuming. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You see, I had to do it on a little desktop computer. They were going to put it on a big, Mainframe, thank you.
And was everything with key punching, or did you actually use a keyboard?
I think it was. I'm trying to remember when I first worked at Ames Research Center, they were using cards. And it was just a point of transition that year. They were finding places to store the old cards. The basement of our building was a great mass of files of old key punch cards.
Did people think they would actually go back and reuse them, or re-enter
Well,
them?
I think they thought, well, you couldn't get rid of them just in case. It might be that one of those cards had the only solution to the problem that existed, and you had to go find it.
She only worked 4 days a week. She didn't last very long. 5 days was too much. She just got tired. So, and even though my father helped, in the end, she still had to manage the house. So, and I will say, you know, my father, he was happy that she went back to school and got a job and liked what she was doing. He never had any issue with any. He was very supportive. He wanted to help her because he was good at math too. She was better. She told him to go away. Yeah, she didn't put up with any of that. She was at her area. She was much better than him, I think. I mean, that wasn't his area of expertise. But no, I think he was never in any way like sexist or anything. He was like, I'm sure he was thrilled that she was working actually. Yeah, I don't remember ever hearing him say anything, but you know, he was a big fan.
And she did it. She got her master's degree at San Jose State and then got a job. So when I was in high school, she was working at Ames, over at Ames Research Center at Moffett Field as a contractor to NASA, doing Fortran programming, which is rather impressive for someone, re-entry, mid-career woman. So yeah, that was impressive too. But that all ended when my father got sick.
When did you just start getting interested in birding and looking at birds?
I don't know exactly what year that was. I'd have to think back. But I was a biology major, so it made some sense. I started birding during my period at Ames, and we used to look at birds on our noontime walks. It wasn't specifically to look at birds. A group of us just went out every day and walked. And I was into birding, so I took my binoculars, but that wasn't what anybody else did. After we'd done it for a while, it was somebody else who brought binoculars, so I could say, it's a such and such for them. But that was just my thing.
So did you join a club to look at birds, or a group?
I had started in a class as a beginner, and we took class field trips a couple of times a month. They were fascinating. One reason, well, he was out on his bicycle every weekend.
He was, or had
And that's one reason I got into birding. And the birding was very exciting because we, among other things, we went to wonderful places that I wouldn't have known about otherwise.
And you did the Christmas bird count. I always remembered that.
Yes.
What was the purpose of that?
It's a fascinating thing. If you do something on a regular basis, say in birding, and it's counting birds, every year, once a year, at the same time, you have some interesting documents with a record from year to year to year to year of what there was in the area you're covering. But it's also a chance to have that birders get together and have some fun and a good dinner together, you know, things like that.
So that's just once a year, right?
Christmas.
Well, not Christmas.
Not Christmas Day, but Christmas season. I guess it was in the 2-week period that surrounded Christmas. Well, they wouldn't be able to get enough people if they only did it once.
Yes.
Whereas most of us did it several times in the season because it was done in different places. People I knew in my Audubon did the local Palo Alto one, There were 3 others that were relatively local that they would do. I did 3 or 4 of them one season. Birds are interesting in winter because there are birds you don't see in the summer that come down here to be a little warmer.
Let's talk about Liz.
My sister?
Liz was 2 years older than you, is that correct?
Yeah.
Was she, what kind of older sister was she?
She was bossy.
She was bossy.
She was a bossy older sister. No, we were never close friends growing up, I don't think. Well, I think, being an only child is not so good. Liz was Liz, and she was difficult in her way, but we were definitely friends as adults. We had not been as children particularly.
Interesting how that changes. But you both settled in Palo Alto, and you both had kids about the same time, and you stayed very close to each other through your entire lives. But Dottie lived into her 90s, and so she was a fairly large presence in our life when we were growing up. Every other week we'd drive from Palo Alto to San Francisco on a Sunday typically to visit my grandmother, and it was always the same. We'd arrive in the mid-morning, spend an hour or so with my grandmother, and then my father would take my sister and I out to San Francisco to Golden Gate Park or Playland when it was still around, or the museums or something, and then my mother would spend the afternoon with her mother, my grandmother, and talk about lady things, and then we'd reconvene at some point and go home. And those are very fond memories because we got to go to San Francisco, the big city, with big buildings and hills, and quite different than Palo Alto, suburban place. Her mother was her mother, and her mother was a interesting person. But my mother had purposefully left the house at a certain age to create some distance. So by the time she came back, and by the time I came along, they had a peer relationship with each other. And then later, when my grandmother declined, my mother and my aunt would come up to San Francisco twice a week to look after her and tend to her affairs. All right, that's another burden that my mother had to bear, was that when my grandmother began to decline, she and Liz would drive up to San Francisco, I think twice a week, and so my mother had to take some time off from work and deal with her doctors and her finances and the house and caregivers later and everything, and take away the keys to the car, and it was very difficult for her. And so my grandmother lived on the slopes of Mount Sutro, and I think it's Clarendon Heights it's called, and it was just a long drive, very difficult getting there, and she had to go there all the time. And
Liz and I were responsible for her, but she had in-home care.
how many days a week did you go visit Dottie during those years?
Probably only once. I was working,
Yeah.
and Liz probably once.
Well, it was a difficult time because of Dottie wanted to stay in her house,
She wouldn't leave it until the very end.
and she lived at the top of a hill.
Yeah. No, we got home care for her.
So, yeah, she goes back to work when I'm 16, and then she worked until my father got sick. I don't know, whatever that was, 9 years later. I mean, I was gone for a lot of that time in college, and then, I didn't live at home after college, so. And then my father got ALS. I want to say that I was 24 and my brother was 22, but maybe 25 and 23, something like that.
I think he died in 1990, so.
Well, if he died in 90, the diagnosis was probably 88 or 87.